The sonar operator's voice was calm, but the command deck's silence was absolute. "Contact, fast mover, closing rapidly on our port quarter." It was the dead of night, deep in the southern Caribbean. For months, the U.S. Navy had been conducting counter-narcotics and freedom of navigation operations near Venezuelan waters, a geopolitical powder keg. But this wasn't a routine challenge. This was a Venezuelan patrol vessel ignoring all radio hails, its bow aimed directly at the $2 billion American guided missile destroyer, the USS Jason Dunham. A collision here, in these contested waters, wouldn't just be an accident. It would be an act of war. They had seconds to decide how to respond to an intentional, high-speed ramming threat. To understand this moment, we have to look back to early 2020. The Trump administration, tightening sanctions on the Maduro regime, drastically increased the U.S. naval presence in the Caribbean. This was an overt, highly visible show of force aimed at disrupting what Washington called a narco-state. For the Venezuelan government, this influx of warships, destroyers, literal combat ships like the USS Detroit, was an unacceptable provocation, a threat to their sovereignty. Caracas mobilized its own small, heavily outmatched Navy and Coast Guard to shadow, harass, and challenge these foreign vessels. These weren't symmetrical naval engagements, they were highly risky games of chicken at sea, and the rules of engagement for both sides were razor-thin. Tensions were so high that days earlier, Venezuelan military aircraft had already buzzed a U.S. destroyer. But nothing compared to the danger posed by a steel-on-steel collision. The Venezuelan vessel, likely a fast patrol boat, closed the distance from 10 nautical miles down to just 2 minutes. The U.S. destroyer's captain, a veteran of multiple deployments, knew that any response would be scrutinized globally. This was a test of discipline, not firepower. The first response was non-lethal and mandatory, repeated bridge-to-bridge radio hails on international emergency channels. Unidentified vessel, you are on a collision course. Alter your heading immediately. Over. Silence. Then, the escalating countermeasures began. The destroyer's powerful spotlights were illuminated, blinding the approaching vessel's bridge. This was followed by highly directional, non-lethal blasts from the long-range acoustic device, a deafening psychological deterrent. The patrol boat held its course. It was a crucial moment for the American crew. The rules of engagement permitted proportional force against a clear threat to the ship's safety. A kinetic response, even a warning shot, would have been a catastrophic propaganda victory for Caracas, an opportunity to accuse the U.S. of starting a war. The captain's order was simple: maximum evasion, minimum escalation. At just a few hundred yards, the destroyer's powerful gas turbines roared to life, and the ship executed an emergency turn, a massive, 500-foot warship performing an incredible feat of engineering to carve a path away. The Venezuelan vessel either misjudged the maneuver or was simply unable to react in time. It scraped past the destroyer's stern, an agonizing near-miss that sent a shiver through the American crew. The tactical decision to avoid firing and prioritize maneuverability had paid off, but the threat was still active. As the Venezuelan ship passed, it made a final, aggressive move, a sharp turn, heading back toward the U.S. vessel. At this point, the destroyer launched its MH-60R Hawk helicopter. The presence of an armed naval helicopter overhead, circling and recording, was the ultimate non-lethal deterrent, facing not just the destroyer but an eye in the sky. The patrol boat finally backed off. The crisis was averted, but the message was clear: Venezuelan aggression would continue. While this specific encounter avoided tragedy, it perfectly captured the risks of the Caribbean standoff. The Jason Dunham incident, alongside others, served as a flashpoint. It also highlighted the massive disparity in naval capabilities. The most infamous event involving a Venezuelan warship that year wasn't against a U.S. destroyer, but against a cruise ship, the RCGS Resolute. The Venezuelan Coast Guard vessel, the Niguarta, attempted to force the hardened, ice-class cruise ship into port. In a bizarre act of aggression, the Niguarta tried to ram the Resolute. Instead of turning the cruise ship, the Niguarta's hull was breached by the Resolute's reinforced bow, causing the Venezuelan patrol boat to take on water and sink. This event, which happened in international waters, provided a stark lesson. Poorly conceived military aggression against a superior, or even a hardened commercial, vessel can be self-defeating. For the U.S. Navy, the encounters reinforced the necessity of disciplined, layered defense, rules of engagement, superior maneuverability, and non-lethal escalation. The key impact was that the U.S. Navy secured a strategic victory simply by not being provoked and forcing the aggressor to back down or, in the case of the Resolute, destroy itself. In the grand chessboard of modern geopolitics, the line between show of force and outright war is often drawn by the professionalism of a single crew on a single ship. The Caribbean remains a critical nexus for drug trafficking and regional political friction. Incidents like the near collision with the destroyer and the unfortunate sinking of the Niigata are not isolated events, they are the inevitable byproducts of a long, tense standoff. They remind us that the most powerful weapon a commander has is not the gun, but prudence. Every engagement is a calculated risk, and in the high seas theater, sometimes the biggest victory is the one where no shots are fired at all. The waters stay contested, but for now, the rules of engagement, and cooler heads, have kept a tense rivalry from erupting into open conflict.